What's up everyone, John from ARTV. It's time for another episode of my Dear Jon Q&A series. Dear Jon is where I take a detailed question from one of my viewers that you guys leave in the comments section down below. Leave your comments starting with Dear Jon so I can control F and find you so I can use your question potentially in an episode. I take a detailed viewer question, something music related, and then I answer it in video form. And something that I've seen with the past few episodes, I just want to put out a little PSA for you. It doesn't have to be about the exact same thing or very similar thing to the last episode or question that I answered. For example, on my pop music and where will they be in years, will it be remembered? Everyone was asking about pop music related things and just other like things about chart success and that sort of thing, or where is the current state of rock and everything like that. That's fine, but I want other types of questions. I want every episode to be kind of different, at least, back-to-back episodes. I don't want them to be the exact same thing. So use your brainstorming techniques and figure out something. If you want to leave it in the comments, I'd be more than happy to read through and see what kind of questions you guys have. Anyways, I've got a good question on deck for us today, so please drop a like on the video, and if you are new here, subscribe to the channel. We've got a question from Local Dreamers, and Local Dreamers had to ask, Dear Jon, how would you define alternative music? So many different people have different views on what alternative means, so I have to wonder, what would you say it is? Well, that's a very, very interesting question because alternative gets thrown around a lot. A lot of people are labeled alternative. A lot of people that are labeled that I would not consider alternative whatsoever. And many people who actually I would consider alternative are labeled something else, some other genre of rock. So let's take a deep dive into what it is, but not get too deep because I want to keep it kind of quick, but I do have an answer for you. The big question that I pull away from this is alternative rock versus alternative. What is the difference here, and are they different things? The short answer is yes, absolutely, but let's first take a look at alternative rock. Alternative rock was a subgenre that was born out of the early 80s in music. Many bands were known for playing music that was perhaps influenced by punk rock, but felt more grounded in its guitar-centric output. Alternative rock blew the hell up in the 1990s, and if you look back into the history of music of this time period, its meteoric rise kind of went hand in hand with what was popular in the culture of that time. There were many varying degrees of just what alternative rock was. Grunge, pop punk, and ska all had elements of alternative rock, because many of these bands such as No Doubt, Soundgarden, and the Cranberries were guitar-driven, but also brought other sounds to the table. Alternative rock still has its place in today's culture, but it's nowhere near as much of a driving force as it was at that time period, whenever they drew in millions of adoring fans. There's not really a Smashing Pumpkins or an Audioslave for the current audience, not at least in terms of newcomers to the mainstream. There's solo artists that embrace parts of these sounds. Obviously, there's bands that aren't exactly maybe mainstream, but are still somewhat popular that do, but overall, alternative rock faded back down to something that's a bit more underground. Alternative is a term that seems to loosely get applied to so many different things these days, so let's talk a bit about the differences between what alternative is and what people perceive it to be. Alternative to me refers to something that's kind of a sidestep from the mainstream, but it does have elements of what alternative rock had. If you think about it, alternative rock was kind of the answer to hair metal, hard rock, and pop music of the time period. So what did they take away from this for the modern alternative? Well, it's kind of foggy at this point because alternative music is now a label that is applied to artists like Lorde, 21 Pilots, and early on, Gorillaz. They were one of the first bands that I ever heard the term alternative used for, really dropping rock from the name and just saying, oh, Gorillaz, yeah, they're an alternative band. Now in current day, I hear people referring to Lana Del Rey, Troye Sivan, and Halsey as alternative, and it's just, nah, no. It's not alternative just because maybe it's a bit of a sidestep to the mainstream. It's a sidestep in a way that maybe it's not exactly pop music, but you know what? It is pop music. And you could say, John, you think Lorde's alternative? She mainly plays pop. Yeah, I think it's wrong that she gets nominated in rock categories and alternative just because it's a misclassification. I think that she's more in the pop, but it's maybe more of a conscious pop, but alternative definitely applies to her, I think mainly because of her ideals and the way that the music just comes to life and the way that she differentiates herself in terms of her performances, her lyrics, and her overall vibe. You're not alternative because you wear different clothes than what other pop stars wear. You're not alternative because maybe your music doesn't exactly sound like that. Halsey Halsey, not alternative. Lana Del Rey, not alternative. These are pop artists that are kind of trying to build up a certain type of image, and then it seems like publications and even places like iTunes and Spotify just go along with it and start throwing them in alternative playlists, which makes really no sense to me. Alternative is a different movement in its modern era, but I think that it's really supposed to stand for something that is the alternative to what's popular. And alternative music is not exactly something that's necessarily always the most popular thing. And with people like Halsey, Troye Sivan, others that have really had chart success in the United States and worldwide just taking over pretty much, I don't feel like they have really any traces of alternative. They build up this kind of faux vibe that screams, I'm trying very hard to make myself look edgy or look alternative, but it's not really about the look at all. It's more about what the music boils down to. And what it boils down to is that it's not alternative. So alternative versus alternative rock, it's gotten very skewed at this point. Alternative rock definitely still exists, and to me that's more of something guitar driven, a certain type of sound and movement, and then alternative still exists obviously as well. And I feel like it's maybe just a bit too loose of a term at this point. But anyways, I hope that this answers the original question for you, and I hope that it explains it to everybody watching this video, at least my take on things. What do you think about alternative music, especially in the modern era? And what do you think about alternative rock? How has it changed and evolved? Please sound off in the comment section down below, and don't forget to drop a like on the video while you're here. If you want to see your question potentially get used in a future episode of Dear Jon, leave a comment down below starting with Dear Jon, and don't be afraid to mix it up. Ask anything music related that you want to. Don't really make it about maybe one specific situation, because I don't really want to do that. It's not about necessarily one thing. If you can give kind of a detailed question that I can answer in detail, unless it's like an older event or something like that, I don't want this to be like a current event topic like, Dear Jon, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about the new Fall Out Boy song? Or what do you think about this? It's not exactly that type of show. It's going to be for something a little bit more broad. And as you've seen the topics for these videos, you know that. So anyways, thanks for watching. If you're able to support on Patreon, it's the top link in the description down below. And other than that, let's cut to the outro. You can go directly to my Patreon page by tapping this annotation in the corner of the screen, or you can catch up on the Dear Jon playlist by watching episodes at this link right here. If you want to see another recent video I did on the channel, you can tap right over here, or you can find me at all of my social medias that you see here linked in the description down below. Other than that, I'll see you very soon right here on ARTV.